Hello and welcome to Ek Mulakat. Dear friends, Ek Mulakat is a platform where we get to know people from all walks of life, their vision of life, their learnings, their struggles, and how they move forward in life. And that is the best learning we can have. Because it is said, either you can read all the books in the world or you can talk to one wise person. So, come today we have His Excellency Mr. Reuben Gauci, the High Commissioner of Malta, here with us in Godlywood studio. Let's welcome him. Welcome, sir.
Omshanti. Thank
to
you
Ek
very much.
Mulakat, to Godlywood studio, to the headquarters of Brahmakumaris. You are the first time you are here, right?
Yes, it's the first time in Mount Abu.
Okay. Sir, I would like to start with the question that how did you get into diplomacy? The field is, this is a high-ranking field, and you get to know people from all walks of life. And diplomacy itself, sometimes in normal conversation we say, don't be so diplomatic. So, but you need to be diplomatic when in international relations. So, how did you get into this field?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's my greatest pleasure and honor to be here with you. So I've been in India already 2 years, and it's my greatest pleasure to be here. Now, to go to your question on diplomacy, I joined the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Malta in 2007 after an examination, and then I went up the ranks, and eventually I became the High Commissioner of Malta here in India. I also cover Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives. So I have quite a large catchment area to cover. You mentioned diplomacy and being diplomatic, etc.
Yes.
It's true. Sometimes, people can be accused of being too diplomatic when they're not saying maybe what they really wish to say.
Yes.
But on the other hand, one can say what one needs to say. Let's not say wish, because in our work we are representing our country.
Yes.
So we speak in the name of our country. So obviously it's not what we wish to say, but what we need to say.
Yes.
But in a way which is tactful and respectful to the cultures which we are meeting. Obviously, diplomacy takes you around the world. You get to meet people from different countries around the world. So you have to be careful in a positive way. First of all, not to say things which in other cultures may be not exactly well received.
Yes.
So obviously, in order to be diplomatic, one has to study, one has to know about the culture. For instance, to give you an example, here in Mount Abu, it's very important to say Omshanti.
Yes.
So that's part of diplomacy as well, that you get to know that it's important to say it, that it means a lot to the people to whom you are saying it. So part of diplomacy is to, for instance, whenever I spoke here yesterday and I'm speaking here today, I started with Omshanti, and possibly we end as well with it.
Yes.
It's a show of respect for the culture which I am meeting right now. And here in this particular place, which is a spiritual place, a very spiritual place, it strikes you immediately with its spirituality, with its closeness to the divine. I come from if I can say so, I come from a different religion. I am Catholic. My country, namely Malta, is Catholic. But finally, this is Godlywood TV, right?
Yes, Godlywood.
Finally, the God up there, or the God here, or the God in our hearts, is in essence the same.
Yes.
So one feels immediately the closeness to divinity, the closeness to the spiritual here in this wonderful place of Mount Abu. I was very happy to see many people here all telling me Omshanti, and it was my greatest pleasure to answer back. And to see their smiling faces. And sometimes you mentioned once more, let's talk once more about diplomacy. We think that diplomacy is a stiff thing.
Yeah, I was about to mention that.
Okay,
It
please.
has a negative connotation. Surprisingly, it got a negative connotation, right? Because as you were explaining, I was thinking, you can say what you need to say with a lot of respect. So diplomacy doesn't mean that you don't say what you want to say,
Exactly,
but you are
exactly.
saying it, but at the same time making the person in front comfortable. You are
Exactly.
not messing up with his ideals and what he believes to be true. So
Exactly.
it need not have that connotation, right? That negative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it also does not need to have the connotation that it is cold. Because
Yes.
some people
Yes.
think that diplomacy is cold. I tell you what I need to say in a respectful manner, but not in a warm manner,
Yeah.
not
Yes.
in a
Yes.
human
Yes.
manner,
Yes.
which doesn't have to be the case. Sometimes, obviously, you're saying things within conferences, within closed meetings, which could be, how can I put it? Not cold, but
Yeah. Yeah.
precise. I have to say
Yes.
this,
Yes. Yes.
this, and this.
Because you're representing countries,
Exactly,
right? It's
exactly,
not a casual conversation
exactly.
between
But
two
on the
people.
other hand, there are moments, like for instance, being here in Mount Abu, being here, meeting people, etc. When you're promoting your country, etc. When I believe, I like to say diplomacy with a smile, warm diplomacy.
Yes.
Today we
Yes.
speak about public diplomacy, we speak about cultural diplomacy. So this idea of having this diplomacy which is not cold, which is not reserved, which is not, is coming in the world of diplomacy these days. And I try to use it as much as I can. I like to use the phrase diplomacy with a smile, for instance.
That's beautiful. But I just things strike my mind in today's politics, because in the diplomacy is very closely connected to politics also, because rulers who rule the nations, they sometimes have to say something to satisfy certain people. All of these things happen. So do you think when our rulers are cannot be called that much spiritual in approach? So this warm diplomacy which you speak about, how far do you think it is practical in the there is a cutthroat thing happening around the world now. So how can you apply it?
Well, it's not easy. I have to admit with you, it's not easy. I mean, the situation in the world at the moment, with
Yes.
the war in Ukraine
Yes.
and
Yes.
with other problems, obviously, in such situations, it's very difficult to speak about diplomacy with a smile or warm diplomacy, etc., etc. So no, it's not easy. But one has to find the situations where one
Where you
can apply it.
Yes. Yes.
And being here in Mount Abu is a particular example of these situations. Here we're speaking about peace,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
We're speaking about spirituality.
And we don't have any other agendas.
Exactly. So here is the right place to apply it, to apply this diplomacy with a smile, this diplomacy with warmth, etc., etc. In other fora, we mentioned the war in Ukraine, etc., etc. It's very difficult to say things which, with a smile. I mean, unfortunately, it's a terrible thing.
Yes. Yes.
But in places like Mount Abu, where spirituality is the agenda, where peace is the agenda, then here is the place where one can use public diplomacy, where one can use warm diplomacy, because we are actually the actual subject is that. And also, just like in every other profession, diplomats are humans. So we even talk about, for instance, soldiers fighting each other, but both sides know that on the other side there is a human. Same applies with diplomacy. We can be arguing about, our country's positions, etc., etc. But one has to keep in mind that on the other side, there is also a human. So that one, so if it can be even done in a war where, even the fighting parts know that on the other side there is a human, it can be done anywhere else. knowing that on the other side is a human. It could be done in business dealings, it could be done in politics when politicians are debating, and even in diplomacy. In a sense, the good thing and what I like a lot about diplomacy is that, unlike politics, in politics you are debating the idea in no holds barred way. And sometimes we see a lot of politicians arguing and fighting and getting red and banging on the table, and sometimes we even see physical fights in certain parliaments. So politics is a sharing of ideas, but in a no hold barred way, which could lead to, whilst in diplomacy, even though we are not agreeing, at least we always keep the civility. And that is something which I like about diplomacy, that I can disagree with you, strongly, at least
in a very
dignified way, where we don't even have to. Because, in politics, the problem is that when, politicians are, especially in democracies, like India and like Malta, when politicians are debating, if one side is very vocal, you have to do the same, because then your opinion will not be heard. And so then you have to, if the other side, unfortunately, say is shouting, then you have to shout as well. That's politics. But in diplomacy, at least you have this, you said it right, a dignified way. So even though I'm saying A and you're saying B, at least we're doing it in a dignified way, which I like, to be honest with you.
At times when politicians are debating, neither A could be heard, neither B.
Of course, it happens.
In diplomacy, at least both of them could be heard.
But so exactly. But sometimes in politics, if one side is shouting more than the other, then it's it happens that one has to do the same, unfortunately. So that's why I'm very happy not to be in politics and to be in diplomacy in that sense.
But sir, I was thinking as you were talking, because you have this beautiful idea of warm diplomacy. And when you hold this thought and when you think about this more and more, there is a concept called like attracting like, and like-minded people catching the same idea, and it spreads unconsciously, subconsciously. This thing spreads into the society when you hold on to your view. So why not we imagine a future where more people like you talking about warm diplomacy, and later politicians and rulers talking about warm international relations. This thing can catch up. And Brahmakumaris has this concept of, you hold on to your values and people eventually will come to your point, because there is peace.
That's right.
There is peace. So that is what I am feeling talking to you now, because even you are talking about this warm diplomacy. It's a great thing in itself, because this is going to, many like-minded diplomats are going to agree with you in the future. So that is a great vision for the future.
It is. And I think we started with the idea that diplomacy is not saying what you feel, etc. And we've already arrived at a point in this interview where we are seeing the value of diplomacy and how, if used well, diplomacy could be even in a certain sense near the spiritual. And we're mentioning what happens here in Mount Abu, where everybody is treating everybody with respect. Everybody is debating ideas, possibly even having disagreements, but the most important thing is that everybody is treating everybody with respect, and that is with diplomacy, we can say. And that is very, very positive about this place.
And sir, for the sake of our audience, I would now like to go into your own, maybe, if I can call it, personal struggles. Not struggles really, but when you are in a position. When you are in a position, there will be opposition, it is said.
That's nice.
So what happens when criticism is there? What happens when people hold you for what you have not done, you haven't even thought about that, but have you met such situations, and what attitude do you adopt?
Yes, I did meet such situations. Diplomacy in a sense is like politics, because what you're doing is affecting others. Sometimes large numbers. For instance, to give an example, following the COVID-19, we started issuing visas for people to go to Malta, and it has been a general problem for many embassies and high commissions here in India that we were not keeping up with the demand, and also that we were refusing certain applicants, etc. Now that immediately creates frustration, creates opposition. So I must say I felt it a lot here in India, and I am feeling it to date. So how does one deal with criticism? Because finally, you know, people may not know what and why you're taking certain decisions. Now, certain decisions, you're taking them because you are asked to take them from back home. So we're representing our governments. So whenever one takes a decision, you're following the law, you're following the requests from your government. But obviously, you know, people in the street may not like what you're deciding. And in the particular case of visas, as I said, because usually diplomats, you know, are usually a little bit away because we're not taking decisions about people's lives in the sense, you know, about electricity, about water, about the economy. I mean, we're not running the country. We're here keeping our relation with the country, with India in this case, but we're not running the country. So we usually, you know, as a general rule, embassies and high commissions aren't there to be criticized because they're not taking any decisions which affect people's lives here in India. But in the case of visas, which I mentioned, we are affecting people's lives. So obviously criticism comes, and especially from people who did not get what they hoped for, or they did not get what they wished for. So, and sometimes it's heartbreaking as well. So one has to take criticism with dignity. One has to accept it first and foremost. Even in our position, we're not exactly politicians. Politicians have to accept criticism even more because they have to give the example, and they're the ones issuing the orders to all the other echelons of government and even beyond. So one has to take criticism with dignity. One has to, once more, the human side of it. If a person has been hurt by your decision, even though you did not want to hurt that particular person, you have to understand that that person is a human being. So, and he or she has a right to be angry, to be frustrated, to criticize, etc., etc. So that's important. And I believe that that's the way to take it. And then obviously, I mean, you know, every piece of criticism comes in a different package. So some criticism is justified, some criticism is not justified, other criticism is unfair, etc., etc. And one has to be careful, first of all, how to select which criticism to take seriously, and, you know, some other criticism which unfortunately is so, you know, unfair that, like today morning, I was talking to another ambassador colleague of mine, and she told me, "Don't worry about this. You listen too much about these things." And I thought, yeah, maybe, you know, this is unfair criticism, which maybe I should not be thinking about too much, and I should not allow it to stop me from what I'm doing, which is because, you know, some people may be so affected by criticism.
If you're sure about, you know, you couldn't have done anything better.
Exactly.
That
because
was my only option.
Exactly. You cannot allow, on the other hand, you cannot allow criticism to stop you from what you're doing, because that would be disadvantageous for the people who depend on whatever you will do from now on.
Because the person who is criticizing may not know all the factors you had to consider.
Definitely.
Yeah, while taking that decision, there's the government on the one side, there are several other factors on the other side. And still, if they are not getting the point, then they will have to wait until they get the point.
Listen, I think whenever we criticize, even us, we should think about this. We do not know. You very rightly put it. We do not know the whole truth, the whole facts. Now, it's not that easy when you've been affected badly by a decision.
Yes.
But one, even when it's criticizing now, because, okay, it's good to accept criticism, but it's also good to know how to criticize, when to criticize. Because when that's what I tell my staff usually when they tell me, we're being criticized for doing this and for doing that. And I tell them, imagine you're that person. Even though he or she may not be right, imagine if you were them.
In that
position, you would probably most likely be doing and saying exactly the same thing. And the same applies. So one has to keep in mind that when criticizing, you may not know the whole facts, which probably you don't. You don't.
In most cases, they don't.
In most cases, they don't. I mean, even this is like when we criticize, big decision makers around the world, presidents and etc. What they know and what we know is a very big. There's a very big difference between what they know and what we know. So certain decisions which may appear outright bad for us may not be that bad, and sometimes you have to take decisions from two bad options, and you find the least bad one. So you know what I mean.
I've read somewhere it is dangerous. It is a dangerous habit to theorize even before you are having all the data at hand, and that's what.
And you never have it all.
Yes.
And you'll never have it all.
And on the other side, I think the person who is being criticized need not go into guilt because he knows that this is the best I could have done. And the people doesn't have the facts, so that is why they are criticizing. So in this case, you need not go into any kind of I had become the cause of trouble for people. No, because you haven't. You did what is best at that time for your country, for the people, for for the country where you are dealing with the international relations. You did the best thing. So there is no need for the person who is being criticized to go into any kind of guilt, right? So that is the basis of spirituality, I think, because we keep the self-respect and we move on.
Exactly. We keep the self-respect and we move on.
Yes. So before we wind up, any message from your side, because you have seen a lot of things, and in India, we especially have a lot of youth watching programs. So maybe in the perspective of the youth or any general thing, because you said you enjoyed the visit in the Brahmakumaris, short as it was. What takeaway? What is it that you're taking from here, and which you want to spread to the whole world?
So I've been in India till now for 2 years. I hope to stay here for as long as I can. Now, we diplomats usually have our time frames, but they can be extended, and I'm hoping that will happen. Because in India, I see a land of opportunity, a land of spirituality, a land of science, and as this conference is called, India as the harbinger of peace.
Peace, yes.
Now, I think what I would like to tell the viewers, especially the young viewers, is to be very proud of your country, India. It is a country full of opportunities, full of possibilities. And on the other hand, it gives a lot of weight to the spirituality and the divine. So the formula is very good. Nowhere in the world is perfect. My country, Malta, is not perfect. No other country is perfect. So, I know usually the young have this tendency of thinking, our country, whatever it is. I've served in other countries. This is not perfect. We want to leave. We want to, it happens in every country. I've heard it in all the countries I've been in, including in Malta, my country. So one does not need to go into that, and one has to look at the future, at the possibilities. And I am so sure by what I've seen in these past 2 years that India has these possibilities, has these opportunities, and has this energy to provide for all its people, most especially, if I may say so, the young. Thank you very much. Omshanti.
Thanks a lot. I never felt that I was talking to a diplomat, for that matter, because the warm, the smiling diplomacy, as you put it, it was very evident all through the conversation. And I think in your dealings also, people will get the essence of this
I hope so.
vibrations. Yes, and as we discussed, maybe there will be many people who will catch this vibration and will spread it. Because that's a natural law, it should happen. So thanks a lot for coming and
Thank you very much.
enlightening us on some important points. Thank you
you.
very much. So that was Reuben Gauci, His Excellency, the High Commissioner of Malta. The message was very warm, as he put it, and it is, smiling diplomacy. You can say the things you want, but be very peaceful while you're doing so. Be dignified and take into account the emotions and feeling of the person in front. When you're dealing with countries, it's the same. Let us start with the individual. If we can hold on to this thought, definitely I will become a harbinger of peace in my own house, in my own society, and later we can see the changes in the whole world. So on that note, we end this Ek Mulakat today, and with another guest in another episode, we'll be meeting you very soon. Until then, it's a goodbye from all of us in the studio.